I would prefer if we had gotten there by now. The Case for Mars, that book was published in '96, and I actually came up with Mars Direct in 1989.
Okay.
And what the hell? I was 17 when we landed on the moon, and if anyone had told me then, I'd be 66, and we wouldn't have, cities on the moon and Mars, and not only that, that we wouldn't have anything on the moon or Mars, but would be stuck in Earth orbit. I would have thought they were crazy at that time.
Yeah.
It's been an unbelievable failure of political leadership.
So many too. It just can't be in one person's lap. It's a whole bunch of different people.
That's
Where do
right.
you think, I mean, where do you think ultimately the failure lies? I mean, technology, do we have it?
Yeah, certainly we have the technology. We've had the technology now for decades. I mean, NASA had plans to send the first human missions to Mars by 1981, and we could have done it. Um, the first giant failure of political leadership was the Nixon administration. It's equivalent to Ferdinand and Isabella welcoming Columbus back from the New World the first time and saying, "Who cares? Burn the ships." Um,
Yeah.
and then it's just been one um, mistake after another ever since.
But you want specifically to put a human being onto those bodies. I mean, you're not content with, say, Curiosity, RIP.
No, certainly not. No, I mean I support robotic exploration if it's the best we can do, but I want to send human explorers to Mars as a first as the vanguard of human settlement.
As like the element that functions technology, why would having a human there benefit the exploration?
Oh, there's no comparison between what a human can do and what these robots can do. Um, you know, I mean, if you've ever attempted to operate a telerobot, let alone one with a, 20-minute time delay,
Yeah, I
believe
was gonna say the delay is murder. The delay really
me,
sets it
even
up.
with
That's where I'm impressed,
instantaneous,
right? The math that it takes to do that.
control, uh, literally a human can do anything the robot can do in 1/1000th the time. And there are any number of things that the human can do that the robot simply can't do at all. I mean, at our Mars Desert Research Station, where we simulate human missions to Mars, on our very first motorized EVA, we actually discovered a dinosaur fossil, and which subsequently dug out by professional paleontologists has led to one of the largest finds of dinosaur fossils in the world in decades. And that was made by human explorers wearing spacesuits. But I have to tell you, since I was there that day, no rover ever could have even gotten to where that fossil was found, because it was found in a little canyon with a 2-meter drop to get into it. Nor would they have
Fascinating.
found the fossil if they had been in the canyon, because it was kind of obscure, and we were picking up lots of rocks and dusting them off. And finally, this one looked a little bit curious, and we took it back to the hab and sliced it open and found bone structure. And the so the rover wouldn't have even found the canyon. It couldn't have been able to get in the canyon, and wouldn't have been able to find the rock when it was in the canyon. Um,
Your fiction piece, that your companion piece to your Mars one, not the Mars, I'm sorry, well, I mean, your characters actually put themselves in danger to.
in the book First Landing, yes.
Yes, I really enjoyed that. They put themselves in danger to acquire the science. I mean, two of
Yeah.
them. There's like 4 people, 5 people on this mission. They put, 2/5 of them in a deadly situation that could have wiped out and murdered the entire mission. Would NASA? I mean, I don't think would an astronaut put themselves in a situation where the whole mission would fail just to prove a point scientifically.
Well, excuse me. The crew. I mean, if we talk about First Landing, the crew dealt with the situations they were faced with when they were faced with it, and um, you know, the
I mean, I guess
the
the
two who actually
robotics.
found the microorganisms did undertake a certain amount of risk in order to find the microorganisms. They weren't placing the mission in danger; they did place themselves in danger,
Yeah.
as scientists frequently do.
And God, there's so much money though
And
attached to those
uh,
particular people being
you
there, and
know,
the care and aggravation to make sure that they survive the journey.
well, look, let me tell you something.
Mm.
nothing great has ever been accomplished without risk.
No, 100%.
You see the great bridges, the
Yeah.
Brooklyn Bridge and the
People die.
suspension bridges that followed it.
Every time they get
Okay,
built, somebody
men
dies.
died building those bridges. You see the
Panama Canal.
skyscrapers that
Yeah.
fill our cities.
Yeah.
Okay, people take risks to
Today,
build.
modern day, the World Trade Center, people died building that building too. So
Yes.
yeah, get your point. Absolutely.
So, the world, both simply the progress of civilization and the progress of science, um, has frequently required heroes. And I think this is something that the former NASA administrator Sean O'Keefe did not understand when he refused to send a crew to repair the Hubble Space Telescope. The astronauts to the man and woman wanted to go and repair Hubble. He said, "Oh, I don't want to take the risk." Well, Hubble is one of the great artifacts of our time. It's
Yeah,
our
that's a
Catholic
good point too.
cathedral, it's a symbol of humanity's search for truth, and it's been very productive in that cause. And it was worth risking life and treasure to fix. And ultimately, because he did not understand that, Sean O'Keefe had to be thrown out of his job as NASA administrator.
I also realize there's an emotionality attached to Neil Armstrong because he touched the moon. I feel like I touched the moon. You know what I mean? I had nothing to do with that, but he did it. He brought it back for us. And I guess sending a human to Hubble kind of did that to me as well. Who was the gentleman? Big, tall NASA astronaut, wrote a book about 4 years ago. Italian from Brooklyn, I think, or Long Island.
I don't know that there are many astronaut books, but clearly the astronauts are admired because they're
Yes,
willing to take risks to themselves to advance the human frontier. And just as, men who landed on Normandy Beach are admired for taking risks to defeat fascism. And now if you have a bureaucracy that is unwilling to take risks, well, then we wouldn't have won World War II and we wouldn't have reached the moon and we're not going to reach Mars. But basically speaking, there are people that are willing to do it and it can be done.
you're connected to a group of people that are willing to do it. Mars One, you have a large population of volunteers, don't you? Or
Well,
they
I'm,
do.
I'm just an advisor to Mars One. I'm not a principal part of Mars One. They sometimes ask me for advice, and practically the only advice they took from me that I gave them that they followed was when they wanted to do a study of a robotic Mars lander. I recommended who could do that competently. But
Interesting.
the but no, I am not um, a principal person of Mars One. I'm just give them some advice. But
Are
it
they,
is
are they
true
still
that
working towards their goal of getting there, or are they kind of stymied by?
I think they've run into a problem. Yes, fundamentally they don't have the resources to do it, and they don't have the required connections to get the resources to do it.
Does Elon Musk?
And and what?
Does Elon Musk? He wants
No.
to get there
Oh,
too.
does Elon Musk is not Mars One?
Well, no, he's got his own little Mars fantasies, though. Do you think he can get there?
Well, yes, actually, I think Elon Musk can get to Mars. He's done a pretty good job of disproving the cynics so far. He's
Yeah,
demonstrated he can develop space hardware in 1/10 the cost and 1/3 the time, as had been considered normal.
it's
He's
incredible.
demonstrated he can develop reusable launch vehicles that were
It's
previously
amazing.
considered impossible.
Has he caught the what is it the third stage? He was having a hard time getting that last time I looked in on the situation. Has that been rectified? Have they finished? Have they figured out how to capture that last stage?
Oh, well, the Falcon Heavy?
Yeah, I think so. They
Yes.
were
Well,
having a
the
hard time
Falcon
catching part
Heavy,
of it.
in the first flight, they recovered the two strap-on boosters. They also almost recovered the central booster. And the second stage, the upper stage, there was no attempt to recover. That one went to space. But they did pretty good in the very first flight of not only delivering the payload to space, which, by the way, is the sum total of the success criteria of all other aerospace companies
Yeah,
who don't even attempt to reuse the boosters. Uh, in other words, that they're not even in the game for that. but these guys recovered 2 out of the 3 first stage boosters, and the third they almost recovered and probably will recover it the second time they try. So that mission was an extraordinary success.
Right. That's so cool. And the again, there was a cultural kind of splash too by sending the Tesla into space. My God, everybody knows that picture. It's iconic now.
Yes, it is.
It's iconic. I mean, that's what you
Shows that
want. I
space
mean,
is fun.
what, I'm sorry, say again.
Space is fun.
Space is fun, right? It's fun. It's scary though. Man, we
Okay.
shouldn't be there. That's what ultimately space is telling me. But you, man, the reason I wanted you on the show to talk to you, the thing that interests me the most is how you put your mind to figuring out those not only answers, but the problems themselves that will prevent us from doing what you want to do. That's incredible.
Yeah.
What? So let's go back. I mean, 17 years old, you said, in space, obviously the moon, we landed, and that kind of turned it on for you as far as I want
No,
to go
I
there
was turned
somehow.
on considerably before that. I was turned on when I was 5 and Sputnik flew.
Oh,
Um,
scared? Were you scared or were you excited?
I was excited. The adults were scared. I was exhilarated. Because I was already reading science fiction, and
Yeah.
this what Sputnik told me was this was all going to be true. It was all going to happen, and I wanted to be part of it. And so, yeah, that's what really turned me on. So I'm a Sputnik kid.
And then the Russians killed a bunch of dogs, and we finally sent a man into space. They did as well. And man, where are we now? And we're gonna go to we're gonna go
Well,
to the
where we
moon. I
are is
mean,
this. Okay, the situation in the 60s was twofold. First of all, we had a clear competitor, and we had a political leadership that was adequate to the moment. This was
so
the
odd
generation.
though, isn't it? You look at Nixon, you don't see a man that goes, "Okay, I'm gonna press my foot to the gas, and we're gonna get to the moon."
Well, it wasn't Nixon that did it. It was Nixon that stopped it. It was Kennedy and Johnson who did it.
Most of the moon
Okay,
landings took
and
place under Nixon's watch, though, because he kind of gets
yeah,
the credit,
well,
doesn't he?
excuse me. Okay, that's absurd. The moon program was started by John F. Kennedy in 1961. He committed us to be on the moon by the end of the decade. Okay, by 1968, Christmas, we did Apollo 8, went into lunar orbit. Okay, we were practically ready to go when Nixon got in. He didn't create that program. He just rode in the ticker tape parades taking credit for it while he was destroying the program.
Right. And the credibility as well with the lies that he told the nation later on. People totally use him as an excuse to say we never went.
Well, there's a few of them, but the issue is this. Um, the political leadership that we had in the 60s, okay, were the people who had won World War II or their younger brothers. And I mean, John F. Kennedy had commanded a PT boat,
Totally.
torpedo boat in World War II. And so he was someone who understood that there are some things that require accepting risk to do. And that, you know, uh, and fundamentally um, understood that the definition of the good life is not one of safety and comfort, but one where you have the opportunity to do great deeds. And so he was of the same species in that sense as the astronauts. And if you look at the political class in the 1960s, you did not have them sabotaging major national initiatives for
Yeah.
political gain.
Because Kennedy got assassinated, he was murdered, so he had that his ghost was propelling things forward.
Yes, but even
Like
so,
you said,
I mean, if you
you
go to
gave him complete
Congress,
credit. And it's like,
I mean, there's various people who are not as famous as John F. Kennedy, but people who were chairmen of various critical committees that were needed to get the Apollo
yeah,
appropriations through and so forth.
so
And there were
crazy.
both Democrats and Republicans playing key roles. This was bipartisan. There was tremendous public spirit evidenced, okay, which we do not see now. There, and this is why the political class has been unable to repeat this. So right now you have the NASA human spaceflight program not spending money to do things, but doing things in order to spend money, because
Hmm.
it has been reduced into a system for distributing funds to politically influential districts. And as opposed to carrying the banner of the pioneer spirit, carrying the banner of astonishing the world with what free people can do, and all of that.
Yeah.
And but but nevertheless, the technical accomplishments were done, and now we have a new breed that is picking up the banner, and it's not the government; it's
Yep.
private initiative. And what Musk has done is not just merely show that he can create reusable rockets. He's shown that it's possible for a private company to do what previously was only thought governments could do. And he's going to be copied. He's already being copied. There's going to be, we already have Blue Origin from Amazon, and we're going to have lots of SpaceXs around the world. We're going to have a private space race. And these people are not going to be doing things in order to spend money. When you run a company, you don't do it to please your vendors. Okay. You do it to accomplish your goals, and you pay what vendors you need to, but that's it. And so
These men
tremendous.
don't just want to get to space, though. There's more involved.
Say again?
They want something else. This is just a step in the direction of their ultimate goal, which is what? Mining asteroids?
Well, I think the ultimate goal, I mean, clearly for Musk, and I know Musk, is to create, transform humanity into a multi-planet spacefaring species. All of the things it means to that end.
But what is the end, Matt, you're going to get when you
That
get
is
up
the
there?
end. The end
Just the technology.
is a unlimited future. I mean, look, let me try to put it to you this way. Human beings are not actually native to the earth. We are native to Kenya. That's where we're from, the Kenyan Rift Valley. We are actually tropical animals. That's why we have these long, thin arms and legs with no fur. We are naturally adapted to live in the tropics and nowhere else. Okay. We
Yeah.
only were
I've never
able
thought
to.
about it like that, but that's 100% correct.
Yeah, it
That's
is. And
beautiful, actually, too. And go ahead, please. This is
right.
awesome.
So we were only able to settle and inhabit the entire earth by developing technologies, including, for example, clothing is a technology, and fire, and houses, and things like this, and actually methods of being able to get food all year round, even in places that have winter, and these more complex methods of getting food, which involve things like big game hunting initially and later agriculture, required speech. So which is language is a technology. Okay. I mean, in the state of nature, human beings did not have language. Every word that we speak was invented by somebody. And the,
I'm
so
loving this because now I'm seeing how your thought process starts from the beginning. How did we form as a species? What did we need to survive? How did we migrate where we migrated to? I mean, we are connected to those Kenyans on that beach. What is it? There's a very small number of family groups at one point in
right.
our
So we were
genomes along
once
those
not a
lines.
global species, but a local species.
Yeah,
Okay.
it's beautiful.
And think of how much richer the human experience has been as a result of that migration, of becoming a global species with around 200 nations at the moment, hundreds of languages and literatures, multiple histories of epic deeds, innumerable contributions to technology and invention from different societies. This is what it means to be a global civilization. Well, just now take that one step further, of becoming a spacefaring civilization with not just one planet, but several planets, and then ultimately thousands of planets, because we now know that most stars have planets. Uh, the future is perhaps envisioned in things like Star Trek, where there are thousands of planets and different cultures and customs and races, because in fact humans will diversify as we move out into the stars. but this is a much more richer future. And if you like, there's two different visions of the future around right now. One is that Star Trek future, and the other is the Soylent Green future, where we're confined to the Earth and we're running out of resources, and so human
Eating our
lives
dead.
have to be increasingly controlled, and so forth. Okay, those are the two possible futures. And what Musk wants to do, and what I want to do, is create the Star Trek future. That's what this is about.
So Star Trek obviously fixed the warp thing. What is it? Light speed. It wasn't light speed. They folded space time, right? I mean, there's a
They
lot of
had warp
theoretical
drive,
stuff
which
at play.
is
Yeah,
fictional, but
fictional, of course, but you obviously can't break the speed of light. And we are talking, even if you did get to one light speed, 40,000 year space of time between our sun and some other sun, there's so much space and technology that we need to get to. Ultimately, you know what my thought was? I'm just kind of rambling because I want to articulate that the idea of continuing the human story is very compelling. We are carrying the legacies and the histories and all of that make us up every day that we go forward, and we want that to continue. We want the legacy to go on, and I think it is important to continue into space so it stays. I mean, our sun's not going to last forever, right? Supposedly there's
yeah,
dedicated science
well,
to that.
okay, well, the sun dying is billions of years away, but
Our
the
planet might not. We're killing our planet right now.
well, I think, frankly, the biggest threat that we face is destroying ourselves, not through environmental destruction or anything, but through war. If people believe that the resources available are finite, then all other nations are ultimately their enemy. And the only question is, when you go to war, would it be better to wait or go now? Is the enemy likely to be stronger or weaker relative to us 20 years from now? I mean, this frankly was the logic that started World War I, and with whose sequel was World War II. That people have this idea that there was only so much to go around. A completely ridiculous idea, in particular for Germany, which started the war. The Germany in 1914 was very large. It was prosperous. It was unthreatened by any other nation, but they thought that the world's resources were finite, and if they waited too long, eventually Russia would develop technologically and be a threat. So let's have the war now.
Yes.
Okay,
You
and
have to admit that the whole thing at World War I and World War II though was to end war at the same time. Germany blitzkrieged. You know what I mean? They ran into the countries they took over, hoping not to have to fight a real war. Ultimately,
no,
they
no,
did on two fronts, but
no. Okay, the Germans were operating under the assumption that there's only so much to go around. And Hitler said Germany needs living space. This was a ridiculous idea. Germany today has smaller territory than the Third Reich, a larger population, and a vastly higher standard of living, because the resources don't come from land. In fact, there is no such thing as natural resources. Resources come from human creativity. They come from technology, which is a function of invention. And Germany never needed more territory. It doesn't need it today. It certainly didn't need it then. But it was all in their heads. It's all in their heads. Now, right now, you know, there are, I know for a fact because I've met them, there are people in the Pentagon who are looking at the rise of China and saying, this has to be stopped. If the sons and daughters of Chinese peasants go to university and become middle class, they'll all start using cars and gasoline and oil, and there's not going to be enough in the world. And you can bet your bottom dollar that they have counterparts in Beijing and also in Moscow will look at the United States and say, they're 4% of the world's population. They're using 25% of the world's resources. That stuff should be ours. These people have to be knocked down. Okay. Now, if that is the mindset, the 21st century is going to be one of repeated world wars. But it's a completely false idea. Okay. The Americans may be 4% of the world's population using 25% of the world's resources, but we produce 50% of the world's inventions, and the other 50% are produced by other countries that are advanced. And it's because of these technologies that China is able to develop. On the other hand, if China was to develop, if the sons and daughters of Chinese peasants were to become scientists and engineers, then China would start contributing inventions and technologies on a per capita basis comparable to the United States, and we would benefit enormously from that. So the issue here is disproving the thesis that nations are fundamentally enemies in a struggle for existence in finite resources.
Yes.
Instead, what we're trying to prove is that all nations are fundamentally friends in a joint project of humanity to expand the human horizon.
It's very interesting that the nuclear weapon kind of is making that a possibility in a way. We are able to talk because we're afraid of blowing ourselves up. I mean, the rational leader understands this. I mean, there hasn't been one that has used a nuclear weapon in more than 80 years, 70 years. I don't know the math. You could probably do it instantly, but um, that technology also allows us to go to space in the first place. I mean, this is what's keeping us together as a species. It's what's allowing us to explore beyond our own atmosphere. And it's pretty amazing.
Yeah. But this is an important thing. The human expansion into space will disprove this idea that we are all enemies. It will prove that there's infinite resources if we work together. And
Did,
and this is important to do because the issue is not, gee, we'll bring back, stuff from the asteroids and that will relieve some actual shortage. The threat does not come from an actual shortage. The threat comes from the idea of the shortage.
yeah.
Because we're not in danger of running out of resources. We're in danger from people who think we're running out of resources.
I mean, there is a theory that you can invent the technology to prevent your own demise before the demise actually happens. What's that called? Do you know what I mean? It
Well,
doesn't
we have been inventing technology
exactly to keep
to
our head above water.
not only
We were doing
prevent our
stupid shit 80
demise,
years
but
ago.
to expand our prospects. I mean, the world has 7 times as many people today as it did in 1800 when Malthus said that population was going to expand more than food production.
Hmm.
But people are immensely richer and not just having
And
enough to
healthier,
eat, but all sorts of
living
things
longer.
that were unthinkable at that time.
Yeah, I mean, the world is a better place, ultimately. There are
Yes.
pockets of horribleness, but in all, we want to live happily together. I think the internet plays a big part in that communication, getting together, cooperation, and we all do it under the same kind of language in a way.
Well, the internet is a step in a process that began, well, first with the invention of language and so forth, but in terms of
Right.
global bringing people together, the invention of the long distance sailing ship by Europeans around 1500, all of a sudden, you could communicate with China on a time scale of years instead of centuries. And then later on in the 1800s, we have telegraphs, and it'd be possible to get messages around the world in a day or two. And then radio and communication satellites and telephones, and now, of course, yes, the internet, which makes it incredibly easy to communicate with people on the other side of the world.
It is
And
true. I mean, I don't know why. It just this last century, we turned our backs on a lot of the things that made living very hard for our ancestors. Stupid skirmish wars over whose farm is or whose cottage that was. I mean, we're done with that kind of stuff now.
well, for
We
now,
want we're not changing borders really anymore. Israel's Israel, Congo's the Congo, but we are trying to put place, systems that work, that don't hurt people, that make people better and stronger.
yes.
And I mean, it's just going again back to the idea of the way your imagination works. I mean, the way the cogs kind of flow together. This is based on everything that has happened and putting it together in a way that kind of expresses the story of the future. And I mean, you're obviously a futurist, right? I mean, you would consider yourself one?
Well, I don't know what futurist means. There's many definitions of it, but I'm an optimist. I believe that we are not living at the end of history. I believe we're living at the beginning of history.
I mean, there has been explosions and horrible things that have happened to humans that have brought us down to almost nil breedable family units, and we've crawled ourselves back up again. So, I mean, the way we're going right now, hopefully we can avoid going through those pains, but we're like a mold. I mean, you really have to scrub hard to get rid of us with bleach and aggravation. Well, also, I wanted to congratulate you on your marriage too. Did you just get married recently?
Yes, I got married June 7th to a
Fantastic.
woman named Hope. She is a science teacher. And she uses space exploration to motivate her kids in her classroom. They're in middle school to want to learn science, and it's very effective. And I think that if we actually had a Humans to Mars program, it would cause millions of young people to want to enter science and engineering and medicine and biology, and they would create enormous advances in the human condition. Just as, in my time in the 60s, the number of American science graduates doubled at every level, high school, college, PhD, precisely because of the excitement that had been caused by the moon program. And we've benefited from that ever since. And intellectual capital is the basis of the prosperity and strength of a nation. And there can be no more powerful engine in generating intellectual capital than a bold space program.
It's totally cool that your name is going to be associated with that program probably for a very long time, probably indefinitely, right? Authors are putting you in their fiction when it comes to Mars. I'm sure you're not going to people and saying, hey, put my name in your story as an elder statesman of the Mars program. I mean, you're being looked at as one of those pioneers, one of those people to Mars pioneers. And you're very
Yeah, well,
passionate about it. I mean, it's
it's
just,
true, but uh, they now have books about Abraham Lincoln as a vampire slayer. I have no idea what they're going to do with me.
oh man, what would you want to be? I'll totally I'll totally write that book too. I'll get off this.
I don't know, but you know, I guess there's nothing wrong with being a vampire slayer, but it's never
Nothing.
been my ambition, actually.
According to some lore, Abraham Lincoln was an awesome wrestler too, and he was a fantastic guy. Might as well give him an axe and kill some vampires.
Yeah.
He was basically a superhero. So Buzz Aldrin is on your team as well. He has been marketing the hell out of Get Your Ass to Mars for like
Yeah,
half a
well,
decade now.
Buzz understands that the great thing he did will be cheapened and potentially made worthless if we don't follow it up. That,
What are we doing in the
the
atmosphere?
reason why landing on the moon is a giant step for mankind is if we decide to go there and beyond to stay. And if,
Mm,
on the other hand, if we turn our backs on that,
yeah.
then we're just, making it meaningless. It'd be like if Americans allow the United States to become a dictatorship, we will be betraying
Uh,
the
man.
legacy of all those that came before us who fought for freedom.
And unfortunately, you say something like that, and my mind instantly goes to the Mexican border, and just makes me sad all over again. Um, it is I lost my train of thought just thinking about that atrocities happening down there. Um, you know, the idea that we went to Mars on the moon in 1969 and then decided to build a floating city, not city, but mobile home in our atmosphere is interesting to me because we had obviously the technology to go to where we went. But instead of saying, wow, this is amazing, we said, you know what, let's hold up and let's do lots of experiments in our atmosphere for the next few decades. I mean, there's lots of money being spent, right? Enough to go to
Yes,
Mars, enough to build a
actually,
colony on Mars. I mean,
if
they're
you want
throwing
to
money in
know,
a furnace.
right, it's the amount of, if you took the amount of money we spent from 61 to 73, which is to say from Kennedy's speech through the final Apollo Skylab missions, uh, and you translate it into today's dollars, added it up, divided by 13, that's 13 years, it'd come out to 20 billion a year. You know what NASA's budget is this year?
It's not 20, it's like 40 billion. It's like real low, isn't
No,
it?
no.
What is
NASA's budget this year is $20 billion.
okay?
It is
I didn't
it
think
is
it was very high.
exactly the same as our average expenditure from 61 to 73 put into today's money.
Yeah, but you have to
So
do the
the reason
inflation
why we're not doing
calculations.
great things in space right now is not because of inadequate money. It's because of inadequate leadership.
How much is $20 billion in 1970 money, though? I mean, it's at least close to a trillion.
No, no, you didn't hear what I said.
Maybe not.
It's no, the average at that time was more like 4 billion.
Oh, I see. You're saying you already did the inflation cost then. You
That
inflated it
exactly.
for us. Okay.
That is, if you turn it into today's money, it's 20 billion 2018 dollars a year.
And then somebody could say the technology they spawn from the atmosphere has been revolutionary, right? I mean, you could,
Certainly.
spin and point at something in your home, and it's probably directly related to some innovation.
Right, that's true. But actually, the bigger gain is not from the specific technologies, but from the technologists. That is to say, uh, who were those, 40-year-old techno entrepreneurs who created Silicon Valley in the 1990s? They were the 10-year-olds who were making rocket fuel in the basement in the 1960s because they wanted to be rocketeers. And and so in other words, Apollo's children created the computer age and all sorts of other technical advances. Once again, that's my point about intellectual capital. That is, the Humans to the Moon program, a Humans to Mars program is a tremendous engine for the development of intellectual capital, and the payback from that is unlimited.
What is the current generation doing like that, making rocket fuel in the basement?
Well, they're
What?
not. I mean, some of them are making video games, okay, and
That
things.
was my answer. It's code, isn't it? It's how to
Yeah,
communicate
but
and make
it's
things
not the
do what you
same.
want it to do.
It's not the same.
Has to be
If you write
something
code,
because
you don't have to address physical and biological science.
maybe that's the point.
Okay. Well, yeah, but we need more people going into physical and biological science and engineering. And
Isn't nanotechnology a fantasy? I mean, if you play around with future tech, science fiction stuff, you have to know the term future or nano, and nano operates on a level that's so small, you have to be able to communicate it with a device that's going to do it over the
well,
air, right? I mean, you're not going to be able to plug
nanotechnology
wires into it.
is not my field, but I believe that some forms of nano or micro technology are certainly possible, including obviously genetically engineering bacteria, which are nano machines of a kind. They could probably be genetically engineered to produce all sorts of useful substances, chemicals, and so on.
That's very interesting. And then
Now,
our generation of military pilots, they fly in a basement someplace, on a machine. We are we don't touch things very much. This generation coming up right now that's not being
right.
allowed to work and being
Well,
told just
but
play video games all the time. It's fascinating the way the human animal is kind of building up this next generation to operate in a cyberspace, that space between things.
yeah, but playing video games is only useful up to a point in terms of encouraging some interests in things that go beyond play.
I know it's
Um,
interesting
but
because
but
I grew up like analog. I was a 90s kid, right? We didn't have the internet. And then when I became an adult, all of a sudden we were in the digital age. So I had a foot in both worlds. When I was a kid, I bought football cards when, I probably should have been more interested in calculus or something along those lines. But kids today have a choice of how to build video games or how to play video games. I mean, you always have a choice in a generation. Like somebody, for instance, like yourself, you chose science fiction. You chose the sciences. You chose Isaac Newton as opposed to, I don't know, whoever was playing in the 1960s, the Mets or whatever, right?
yeah, well, no, I was always more interested in science and
That's my point,
exploration than in
right? But
sport.
you're still geeked out
But
about something but it turned out to benefit your life ultimately. Like football cards for me as a kid did nothing to help me as an adult. But knowing science fiction terms and things like that did. But I'm pretty sure your parents probably looked at your obsession with that and said, come on, dude, go into sales, car sales or something. I don't know. Every generation has the previous generation saying they're wasting their time, but it turns out to be beneficial for human or mankind.
yeah, well, sure. No, my parents would have been very delighted had I become a medical doctor.
Oh, really?
Um, but they could see the value of that.
It
And
wasn't,
so,
I mean, you
they
could have been
did
a doctor,
encourage
right?
my
I mean, this is a choice
science
being what
in
you are.
general. Uh, but but anyway, I think what we need to do as a society is create a situation where kids are given the message that the great adventure is science. Because youth loves adventure. That's what youth is all about,
Yeah,
right?
totally.
Adventure. And if science is the great adventure, we'll get millions of the best and brightest going into science.
That's very
Uh,
true.
and the benefits of that will just be beyond counting.
But how do you do it? You definitely don't do it
You
by
do
putting
it
people in
by
the jet.
having a bold space program.
Well, you do it
That's
by
how you
having a
do it.
bold space
You
program,
certainly
but you
don't do
also,
it. You
you,
don't do it by testing the kids to death with standardized
No, you don't
tests.
do that. You don't, because then you don't exercise the brain. It doesn't become flexible enough to have imagination until think outside the box.
Right.
That's my
That
opinion.
just tells people school's a drag.
It
And
sucks, right? It's just there's a place to go that you're in prison for 8 hours. That's what kids
right,
think. That's what I thought. I don't know how you grew up, but that's how the kids are being basically
sure.
raised.
But if you're interested in science and then you're hungry for it, then instead of being a prison, it's a banquet. It's it's a playground. It's where you could learn things and try them out and that kind of thing. And furthermore, you take that learning activity way outside of school, which of course is where you really learn stuff.
Yeah, exactly.
And but there's nothing we could do that would do more for American education than start a Humans to Mars program.
But we do not have one right now.
We don't. No,
We
we don't.
don't have one right now. I thought we were building. No, I just read an article that Orion, is it Orion? This Orion space program is not meant to go to Mars.
Orion is a very large space capsule. It's too small to use as a habitat to go to Mars and back.
That's what I
You
read.
use
Yeah.
it as a bailout capsule for when you do come back from Mars, but a Dragon is much smaller and lighter and easier to take. Orion at this point is a patronage program. Uh, you know, I mean, it was originally designed to be part of a Humans to the Moon program, but the other necessary pieces of that program were never built, and NASA's not proposing to build them now.
We've been
Uh,
building that for like 18 years, or how long have we been on the Orion? Since
the,
Bush, right?
well, yes, since
No.
2005.
It doesn't take 13 years to build a rocket,
No,
does it?
it,
No.
the Apollo capsule took 5 years to develop from contract award to first flight with people, and that program was slowed down by a fire at the Cape that killed 3 astronauts who were in it during a drill.
Mhm.
And and they were inventing the thing the first time, whereas here all we had to do was copy it.
Yeah, we have a
And
perfectly
a
working model
three-year
to base
program,
everything on of. We have a
3 year program, not a 13.
perfect. It doesn't make any sense to me. It really doesn't. And all it is politics and money.
Mm.
Your statement about NASA being spread out to these political districts all across the country is horrid. I mean, it's not about exploration. It's not about making us better as a species. It's about what can you give me? And if you can't give me anything, I'm not going to help you out.
Well, there's different parts of NASA. You see, now a lot of people point out that the space astronomy and the robotic planetary exploration programs are accomplishing things, and whereas the human spaceflight program has not accomplished very much in recent years, except for its missions to Hubble. But that's not because of the intrinsic difficulties of human spaceflight and the costs. It's because the space astronomy and robotic planetary exploration programs have been run in a purpose-driven way. That is, it's run by people who want to accomplish clear objectives. They are spending money to do things. The human spaceflight program has become a patronage program. It is doing things in order to spend money, of which the most recent example is this thing called the Lunar Orbit Gateway, where the Trump administration says it wants to go back to the moon. And you could argue about that, but okay, it's a reasonable objective. It's plausible, but then they don't actually have a program to go back to the moon. They say, okay, we want to go back to the moon, but we don't have a lander, so we'll build a lunar orbiting space station. But you don't need a lunar orbiting space station to go back to the moon. It's not advantageous to go to one on the way to the moon. It actually makes the mission harder. It's just a way to spend money.
So, I mean, I saw you had a conference just recently in May. I think it was May, where you talked about going to the moon or leaving the moon. I think that was your.
I presented an architecture, a plan for sending humans to the moon that was as efficient as possible. And it doesn't require a lunar orbit gateway. And it requires a lunar lander, which you need in order to go to the moon. And I would make that lunar lander use propellants that can be made on the moon so it can come back, which is, say, hydrogen, oxygen, because there's ice at the South Pole of the moon. And we can make hydrogen, oxygen propellant so that once we get the base going, we can come back with propellant that we make on the moon. And the whole mission becomes much simpler and lighter, so much so that you're able to do a human lunar mission with a single launch of a Falcon 9, not even the Falcon Heavy. Falcon 9, because we don't send the capsule all the way to lunar orbit. We leave it in Earth orbit. We just go to the moon in a lightweight lunar excursion vehicle, fuel to travel one way, and then we refuel it on the moon to come back. But actually, we would probably have made the propellant for it by the previous mission, so they won't have to rely on the hope that someone will make propellant. The propellant will be waiting for them.
Where are you in terms of the fiction world? Because I would buy a book from you every single day for the rest of my life if you would write more fiction. You, Andy Weir, Neil Stevenson, you dudes writing like real stuff. It's exciting, and I wish you did more of it. It's too bad it's
Yeah,
hard.
well, I wrote a novel called First Landing that I think would make a very good movie, and I hope to have it made into a movie, because that will reach a lot more people than a novel
Yeah, that's
does.
true.
Um, right now, I'm working on another nonfiction book, which I hope to have out next summer, which will be the 50th anniversary of the moon landing.
Oh, cool. Is it on the moon?
It will cover the moon, Mars, the outer solar system, and the stars. The whole thing. Big picture.
Yeah. Do you, I think honestly, you have an echo that never went away of 19 Sputnik, whatever it was, 1951. Was that what it was?
57.
1956? 57. Okay. I was adding it up and just put the 1 and the 6 together. I mean, we have an echo of that. It's continuing on. And I think what scares humans the most is actually venturing into the space. I also think that lobbying hurts as well. You know what I mean? Can you do an experiment of this in space? We'll give you this amount or this, that, or whatever the hell. It just, we're so selfish and greedy, unfortunately, nowadays. And since 1968, that's what's holding us back, honestly. It has nothing to do with anything else other than greed.
Well, lack of focus. I'm going to have to go in a
Yeah,
couple
we're
of
at
minutes.
that point, and I
Uh,
just wanted to, finish up with 2 questions with you, if you don't mind. Just the first
sure.
one being, it's obviously you're not forming these ideas in a vacuum, and I would be very curious what you're consuming right now, like what fiction's on your Kindle or what kind of television you're watching, stuff like that.
Well, right now I'm reading a book that Freeman Dyson wrote recently called Dreams of Earth and Sky. Um,
I've seen that title.
um, okay, that's what I'm reading at the moment. I also recently read a book by the British astronomer Royal Martin Rees, Our Cosmic Habitat. Um, they both in different ways carry a vision of the human future, which I share, but I have my own ideas on how to bring about.
Fantastic. I appreciate that. And I look forward to your book coming up. Is there any way that people can get a hold of you or that you want people, anything that you want people to be aware of, like
Sure.
direct them
Okay.
to
First of all, the
website?
Mars Society, which people can find out more about at our website, which is marssociety.org, is having its next international convention at the Pasadena Convention Center, August 23rd through 26th. So people can come to that. In fact, if they want to speak, the call for papers is still open from now through June 30th. You can submit an abstract and maybe get a chance to speak at the conference. You can also join the Mars Society, sign up for our bulletins. Also, I've got a book that's out now called The Case for Mars, which, if you're interested in this subject, I think is a book that they might want to read.